All right, come on in and wait for you. All right, so today we just want to bring you in just to try to get to know you a little bit better and find out some things that you have to offer for our campus. We're going to start with introduction, and we will go kind of round table, just asking question for question. We have a little set of interview questions that we prepared. So just answer honestly and just answer to the best of your ability. If there's something you don't know the answer to, then just let us know, because we've all been there. And we just want you to just, all right, so I'm Monica Miller, and I'm the principal of Stanton Smith.
I'm Kim Watkins, and I am one of the fifth grade teachers here at Stanton Smith.
That's Jennifer Blankenship, and she's one of the RLA social studies writing teachers in fifth grade. All right, so I'll go ahead and get it started first. Would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Lauren Clinton. I've been teaching for 5 years. Well, this is my 4th. This will be my 5th year of teaching. I've taught 1st grade and 5th grade. I'm 26 years old. I just moved here.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I have one daughter. She's 18 months old, and my husband, his name's Cole. He works from home for Micron General Contractors. So, yeah.
Well, welcome, and describe your teaching style, please, for us.
If I were to describe my teaching style, I would say it's very hands-on, student-directed. There's a lot of movement in my classroom and interaction. I have a very informal, I would say, classroom environment. I prefer the kids to be very real with me and open with me. It's a lot of collaboration. It's a lot of their giving me input and me doing as little output as possible so that it's led by them.
If I were to walk by and peek my head into your classroom, explain what I would see. Like, what does it look like? What are you doing? What are the kids doing?
Most of the time, I mean, okay, so it kind of depends on the day, you know, some days are more teacher-led because they have to be, so like no days, but I try and limit those as much as possible. This year I've been teaching science, so a lot of days we do observation stations where they're rotating around the room and working in teams. They're working hands-on with materials some days, or maybe looking and observing things on pictures. Some days we work with computers and we do near pods. We do rotations where it's small group and maybe some task cards, and then a sort and activity group, and then a near pod station online, and maybe like a virtual simulation. It kind of depends on the day, but I would say kids are definitely moving and talking and collaborating.
So the next one, what motivates you on the most challenging days?
I guess it comes down to your why, you know, knowing why you do the job that we do. And even when they're giving you the hardest time, knowing that deep down they love and respect you, and that you do really have fun with your job most days. You know, I think it's all about having fun and enjoying yourself, and your people you work with is 90% of your battle. I always tell everybody that. I care more about who I work with than what I'm teaching. And if I enjoy the people I work with, then I'll enjoy the job that I have, period, no matter what it is. If you like people, you like the job. So
That's true. Good job. Okay, so this next one's kind of a 2-part question. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being you strongly disagree and 5 being you strongly agree, you're going to rate the following statement. We'll just do one statement first.
1 was you agree.
1
disagree.
is you strongly disagree,
And
and then
agree.
5 you
Okay.
strongly agree. I can reach the most difficult child.
So before this year, I might have said 5. But after this year and having some of the kids I have, I might put it down to a 4 or 3.5, 4. It depends on the kid. Probably like a 4, I would say at this point, after having a difficult child this year, that it was harder to reach than any of my other kids. So.
Okay, good job. And then the second part of that question, the same scale, 1 to 5, 1 being you strongly disagree and 5 being you strongly agree, rate the following statement. A child's home life ultimately determines his or her success.
This is a hard one for me, and I struggle with that. I would say it's a 50-50 on most scales to me. I believe that a lot of them you can reach regardless, but I also like the hierarchy of needs, you know, if they're not being met at home with their basic needs, like who's to say like you would care about school when you come here when all you're thinking about is safety at home. So like who can blame them? We can only cover so many bases when we can only cover school, you know, so maybe a 2.5, 3.
Okay, this is about technology. Share your experiences with technology in the classroom. What types of technology are you familiar with? How do you utilize it in the classroom? Do you use technology? You said earlier.
I love technology.
Okay.
I feel like, especially in like today's day and age, they gravitate towards technology. They're fluent with technology. So I feel like technology is, without using it, you're not like utilizing all your best resources. And so I use it quite frequently. On a day-to-day basis, we have iPads and Chromebooks, and on there for some quick stuff, for reviews, we'll do bookets or quizzes or Kahoots. For lesson strategies, this is like my favorite, would be Nearpod. They have pre-made lessons on there for you, and it's teak-based as well. And I've done it multiple ways. Like you can go on and use a lesson that's pre-made, and you can adjust and adapt it to meet whatever. And so I've used it to adjust, and they run their own stations, and like they go through a map on the paper, and they just have to like cover different bases with different things, where some of it's on paper, they're still using the Nearpod, some of it's like all on the Nearpod, for videos and all of that. So it's a good way to use it.
Sure, in the same age, the kids love
They gravitate
technology.
They do. And so what do you feel are the most important things to cover the first weeks of school and why?
Okay. I think the most important things to cover the first few weeks of school, one is procedures. I always start with procedures just so they understand how we do things here. This is what I expect from you. When we say this, we do that, you know, lining up, how to get to lunch, well, how we walk in the hallway, how I expect you to communicate with me, those kind of things, and following that with like rules as well. At that point, we set those together, and we do a behavioral contract typically for my classroom. We have hand signals and behavioral cues that we do as well. And then I also set rewards and consequences with them so that they know if they choose not to follow my procedures and rules, what's going to happen. And if they do, they could also earn stuff. So.
Okay, describe a time when you did not agree with the decision that your principal made. How did you handle the situation?
The most common, I would say, or easiest to describe with a disagreement with the principal would be maybe like a behavioral issue in the classroom. And if it's not handled to the severity or too severe, you know, it's happened, it happens all the time. We all have different interpretations of situations. And so at that point, you know, we move on with the situation at hand. And at that point, I would go down to their office and handle it privately and openly with them and tell them how I feel about the situation and how I wish that it would have happened one way or another, and hear their side. Because again, we all interpret situations differently. They might not have been there. They might have missed part of the story and that kind of thing. We move on from there.
So in a typical classroom on our campus, our students range from severely below grade level to above grade level. Do you believe it is possible to meet the needs of all learners despite their academic abilities? And then why or why not?
I do feel like it's possible to meet every need of every learner. Again, every day holds different challenges, and some days one learner might struggle more than another. I do this personally in saying your whole group lessons, I pull from the top, and so I teach to the highest level, even if it leaves some behind it. I feel like if you pull from the top, it pulls your bottoms with you, and they're not getting nothing, they're still getting something out of it. And then when we break out into stations and small groups and stuff like that, that's where the scaffolding happens, and it's where I can pull and meet the needs of low and middle and high. At that point, it's where you can push and pull for the differentiation of them.
Sorry, I'm just trying to write all this stuff down. Okay, as a teacher, you communicate with parents on a regular basis about their child's progress and their behaviors. Describe a time when you encountered an upset or a difficult parent and how you handled the encounter.
So this particular year, a good example that comes to mind has been a bullying, issue. Okay, so a parent has reached out saying that, hey, her child has felt bullied. This is what's going on. We're not okay with it. She's upset her kid's getting picked on. So at that point, or in any situation, a parent comes to me upset about something, I like to make them feel heard and validated. So I understand that's not okay. Like, we definitely don't want them to feel that way. Kind of diffuse the situation a little bit firsthand, just like make sure, we're not coming at them or we don't disagree. From there, we address the situation and let them know how it's being handled, that we're going to do something about it or not, or how we're going to handle it depending on the situation. So for that one, we said we are handling it. We're talking to the kids in the situation. I'm also going to let my principals know, because it was bullying, that this is happening, so that they're aware. And it's happening at a time that we're not necessarily with them in the classroom, so that they can let the other teachers know that are with them at that time. And then the principals at that time, because it was bullying, reached out as well to the parents.
If I were to ask your coworkers to describe you, what would they say and why?
If I were to ask my coworkers to describe me, I feel like some words that would come out of their mouth might be adaptable, flexible, positive impact. I try to give my best foot forward at all times and be as positive, even when it's not the easiest.
So what if we were to ask students to describe you? What kind of words would they say and why?
I think this one's hard to answer because we're all self-critical, So I literally asked them today before coming. And the thing that stuck with me that was like, wow, is that you're the teacher that they'll remember. So that one, like, I was like, okay, that like, I feel good. But sorry, what? Yeah, I'm the one that will sit with them and hear them out. I make them feel heard and seen and loved. That I'm real. That one was funny. They're like, you're real. So yeah,
Not just real, but real.
yeah, their version of real.
Love it. Okay, so for this one, what is one of your biggest strengths and why?
Oh, okay. I think biggest strength would be willingness to like try new things, especially in teaching. I feel like it's constantly changing and they're constantly throwing new things at you, like at all times, like everything's changing 24/7. So I think it would be that like my willingness and ability to try and fail even, because not everything works out well, like it never does. And so willingness to jump in and try new things openly and give honest opinions about things.
Okay, and kind of the opposite of that, what do you think is one of your biggest weaknesses and why?
I think feeding off of that, even like kind of the same thing, as much as that's a strength, it can also be a weakness, because I do tend to say yes to things that maybe I should say, hey, no, like I take too much on my plate, or I'll say like, I'll try and do everything, where sometimes it's better to reel it in and say, hey, no, like, and pump the brakes and know your limits. And like, again, something that's improved in the last 4 years, like starting year one, it was like way worse. I'd take too much on my plate and I try and do it all. I'd be here till 8 o'clock at night, you know.
Mhm.
I've learned slowly how to reel that back and do what's necessary to succeed without taking too much on.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question that's not on here.
Okay.
So your kids take a district test or benchmark
Mhm.
test. Now what?
Okay. Like with the data. So it depends on the platform. We use DMAC here. So at that point, I think I'd run data reports and we'd look at that and see. So what I look at mostly on there is, so for the, it depends on the test they're taking, right? A lot of my tests this year have been 9 weeks tests. So in those, I was looking at 1 or 2 TEKs at a time. So I really looked at the average there because we were only looking at a unit. So if they were low for that unit and over those, just those TEKs, those are the ones that I'd spiral based on their scores. Now, the last test was our like summative benchmark. And so at that point I had a breakdown by quintile, by sections and whatnot. And so for that one, I had to break it down and see who was low in each of the subsets for the science. There's 4 of them. And from there, I'd break a plan from now until STAR. And then now I have a plan for this week for when I'm covering this unit, and they'd be put into groups for this TEK and unit, and then this TEK for the next week, and have that plan and the next TEK for that, you know, and so I take that data and it creates my groups for me. I also, this last one, did a TEK breakdown with them where they had to take their questions and grade that themselves and figure out where they were at so that they could set goals for themselves and all of that as well.
You said they use DMAC.
Yeah. That's the only platform I've used so far, but I've only worked at one school, so it's always new.
So I know that on your resume, and you talked about in the very beginning of the interview that you taught 1st and 5th grade.
Yeah.
Whenever you're, you know, from 1st to 5th, were the kids still setting goals whenever they were in 1st grade, or was it just something that you predominantly did with the older kids?
It looks a little bit different downstairs because, you know, their maturity in setting it with themselves. A lot of it centered downstairs with their reading scores and whatnot. So are the reading levels, because that was like our big push. If they can read, we can move on, you know, or they tend to do better if they're reading. So they had a graph, say in 1st grade with their starting reading level. We did beginning, middle, and the end of the year benchmarking for them, but they also had progressed through the year. And so my groups down in 1st grade were very fluid with the reading groups. Like if they were excelling, some weeks, especially with 1st graders, they grow super quickly and then they'll plateau for like a month or 2. So like sometimes they'll be moving up a group every week. And then sometimes they'll plateau and be in the same group for 2 months. And you're like, what's going on? But it's just their developmental leap. So each month we would progress monitor with them and fill in their little bar graph where they get to see, you know, we'd talk about it. So they'd set goals that way with 1st grade. And then by the end of the year, most of them, if not all of them, hit that bar graph high of the J was where we wanted them leaving 1st grade. And then 5th grade, it's based off of benchmarking, which it was kind of hard this year because I didn't have a beginning of the year benchmark. So it was kind of hard to set goals until now. So now that we've had our 9-week scores, it was based off of, you know, 9-week averages, their benchmark. And now where do we think we could push to get to the STAR?
And we're, you know, still talking about testing, you know, confirming data. Have you administered STAR before, or is this gonna be your 1st year?
This will be my 1st.
Okay. And I mean, I know that's gonna be a lot of new experience for everybody because the platform's changing and the question types and all the things. So I think you came in for a good year.
And you're learning new things, lots of new things.
My turn? No?
Yes.
If the majority of your class were to fail an assignment or test, how would you respond?
I think this happens more than like a lot of people, you know, say or realize, because sometimes it just doesn't work, you know what I mean? Like an activity might not work. It might be the activity, it might be you, and like maybe what I said didn't stick, you know what I mean? So at that point, I assess why. Is it the activity, or was it they really just they don't have it? Or maybe it's how the questions were presented and they know the material, but they've never seen it like that. You know what I mean? So this being my first year teaching science, I think I saw a lot of that this year. Like, hey, they know it. We learned it. We've taken notes over it. And then they go to task cards or they go to a quiz or a test, and it's like their grades aren't aligning with what I see in class. You know what I mean? And it's not that they didn't know the order of the planets or that it revolves or that it rotates, but they haven't seen that diagram. And so, or they've never heard of a charcoal grill. You know, they think you plug in your grill. So they're choosing that it's electric instead of heat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things like that. So you have to figure out like where the problem's originating from. But a lot of the times, generally speaking, I'd go back to a mini lesson. From there, we break out into more specific groups, maybe a game if that would work, or a sort, or like, hey, maybe we walk through some questions together and I like teach them how to think about it. I've done that a lot this year, like, hey, when you see this word, say electricity, you know, you're looking for the word plug or cord or wires, or if you see anything that describes spinning or moving or a verb, you're choosing mechanical, like automatically. You don't even have to think about the answer. That's going to be your answer. Like teaching them how to see it in a question and apply it, what they already know to that.
So, why did you decide to become a teacher? What is your why?
Sounds very cliche. And I always like hate this question in interviews because I feel like, you know, it's a cliche answer, but I love to teach for one. My mom has been a teacher for, I can't even, more than 25, probably close to 30 years now. So I literally grew up in the classroom, you know, like all the time.
Teacher
After
kid.
school, before school, we were in the classroom. I lived the life before it was mine. And she was the best teacher ever. Like she was, I would say just like I am, probably because I am like literally learned from watching her. I was in her class in 5th grade, actually. She was my 5th grade math teacher. And
You were
she
in her
loved,
class.
oh yeah, it was great. As good or as bad as that was. She'd be like, I'm gonna mark you and I'm not signing it. Your dad's gonna sign it. And I'm like, what I just did it.
You know, nothing.
It was great, yeah. But yeah, she loved her job and she was great at it and enthusiastic about it. And no matter what people said about how horrible teaching is, you know, it was always, she loved it, you know. So she inspired me to become a teacher, and I loved watching her teach. I love being at the school. I like impacting kids' lives and helping them and getting to encourage them and teach them how to be people. That's what I say. I said half of our job is teaching kids how to be people and appropriate and say the right things and how to make mistakes.
Which is getting harder and harder these days. With
Yes.
all
Technology.
the-
Yeah.
Okay, so on our campus, we've got a couple of open positions this year. If you had like your sweet spot, now you have exposure to lower elementary and the upper elementary. You know, I'm saying you had a chance to kind of think about your sweet spot. What kind of grade level range what do you think that you're most you're most fitting for you?
This is a hard question because, you know, again, every grade level comes with pros and cons. Like the little ones worship you, you know, no matter what you do, you could scream and get in their face or whatever, tell them whatever, and they would love you and hug you and whatever, you know. But on the other hand, they're not independent learners and they need your hand holding and they don't know what to do with trash when they find it on the ground. Like literally, like they would literally come to me every day and be like, I found this on the ground. I'm like, it's a broken crayon. What do you think you should do with it? And they throw, you know, versus like 5th graders, you come with new challenges. They're independent, they can read, they can do self-guided things. You don't have to break it down as slowly, you know. There's more activities and options available, but with that comes the sass and the sarcasm and almost like rudeness at times. So it's like a double-edged sword. Is what sword do you want to deal with? And my saying always, when people ask me, they're like, what do you like to teach? And I say, I just like to teach. Like, I like to teach kids. Like, I don't know that I have a favorite grade level. I think they all come with their pros and their cons. And I don't think I could tell you which one's my favorite because I really like them all for a different reason. So wherever I were to fall, it would be great.
Big question to ask you before start testing.
Right now you may be a little biased
It
against.
depends on the day, if you ask me right now. Today was a good day.
You've kind of already answered this in some of your other things, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. What do you think the qualities of an excellent teacher are?
How would you describe your mom?
Yeah,
Fun, loving, caring, flexible, willing to learn. Like teachers are forever students, like you're constantly a student and your job is never gonna be the same. Kids are forever changing, so adaptable, flexible, confident, loving, empathetic, team players. I'm trying to think about anyone else.
All the things.
All the
nurse,
things.
Counselor.
Yeah, nurse, counselor, teacher, mom, dad, sister, friend, all the things. Everything that the kids need you to be.
Yeah.
Not
You kind
me.
of do just, you've just been in
Build
flex
what
of
you
whatever they need.
Yeah, so you gotta be adaptable.
What do you feel is one of the biggest challenges that teachers today face?
I think this is an ever-changing question too, but like, things are constantly being thrown at teachers, like, do this, and now you need to do this, and now we expect you to also do this, and you're like, we have like 20,000 other things that we're also doing, and so like we said, we're mom, and we're teacher, and we're counselor, and we're
Mhm.
teacher, and you're also supposed to learn all this content, at the same time, while they're also learning how to be human beings, like, that function in a normal world with rules and society expectations and whatnot. So, and then on top of that, you have technology and all the things they do at home, and holding their attention here at school would probably be one of the hardest things, like keeping them engaged and keeping them interested in what you're doing is ever more challenging right now, because like when they go home, they sit in front of a TV or an iPad. And so that's their expectation. They'd rather just sit there and watch a movie or TV or play on their phone. So keeping them engaged and into their learning so that they're invested, I think would be the biggest challenge right now.
Okay, so, why do you want to teach the students?
Well, even in college, so, I went to college right down the road, or I graduated right down the road after going to OU. And so when I went to ETBU, everybody talked about districts around here, and we student taught and whatnot, and White House particularly, was highly spoken of, it was White House is where everybody. That's my phone, I'm sorry. What is that? It was the highly spoken of and highly sought after district, like out of all the districts around here, this is the place to work. Because of there's a lot of teacher retention here. There's not a lot of turnover in White House. It's hard to get a job here because people didn't leave here. I feel like the quality of teachers are great here. They're higher level. The students that we typically get, I feel like are higher level, or maybe the expectations are set here that are higher. So the kids that come know, the expectations. So I feel like it's just a positive environment to work in. I've only heard good things, so I'd like to be a part of that.
What do small groups look like in your classroom? Like, how do you manage them? How do you plan for them? How do you group kids?
So small groups, it depends on the time. When I've done them before, if I'm addressing specific TEK, I might pull kids that just need to work on that TEK. If I have the time, so like at the beginning of the year, I stretch it and it'll be for that unit. So I have a lot more time to cover one topic or one or two TEKs, So it might start out with reteaching from the start, I might go all the way back to like a mini lesson where we're like direct teaching it. So I might break down the vocabulary and pre-teach vocabulary one day. The next day we might take some notes over like a mini anchor chart note sheet where they add it to the journal. The next day we might do a hands-on activity, or we might start with that. Kind of depends on what we're talking about. But like actually, if we're talking about like density or solubility, we might actually mix stuff in or actually see it happen. So it's hands-on and concrete for them. Then typically we probably do our note or anchor chart that connects to the hands-on activity the next day. From there, we might do a sort with it in pictures and cups and hands-on that way. After that, we practice, and we stretch it out to a more abstract, where we're starting to see the vocabulary and the pictures into like a test question, you know, and we'll read through it and break it down, all of us together, and read through it and what stands out, and like, you know, show them in a box or show them together, you know. From there, we might do it half and half, and then at that point, we'll independently practice, but at my table, because I feel like if they don't know it, they don't know it. You know what I mean? Like more practice isn't gonna make them know it. So I'm all about, and if they're making a mistake, it takes, they say what, 5 or 30 times to do it right for one time to break the habit. So try and making sure they're not making the mistakes when they're doing it to prevent them from making more mistakes.
Earlier, we had a question about, disagreeing with the principal and how you would handle that. What about, a coworker? Have you ever had a situation, or what would you do in a situation if you disagreed with something your coworker did or said, or you saw something inappropriate? Like, how would you handle that?
I don't really like have been in a situation thus far. Like honestly, in my 4 years, I haven't really, I'm pretty hard to irritate. Like I have a very long patience, and it takes a lot to like push me to that point, but I'm a very straightforward person at the same time. Like if something's bothering me or something's happened, I'm one to come say it to your face and talk to you, because I'd rather like, I mean, if you have a problem with me, I'd like you to come tell me so we can fix it, because if I don't know it, how am I gonna fix, you know? So I'd like to extend the courtesy the other way as well, even though it's uncomfortable.
Okay, so I'm not gonna try something I haven't tried in an interview before, if you're comfortable with it. So you talked a lot about using technology in different ways, and you have any of your quad lessons that are saved, where you can access it quickly?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to be able to see how that looks in a classroom, because I've seen it during a training, but never seen it
Yeah, we got it.
in real life. To be able to do for us.
Right. Let's see. Find the- Let's see. Find the word. There we go.
You know, Nearpod is a free,
It's completely free. That's what one of our trainings were this summer, and since then I've used it a ton. And it goes for like all grade levels too. So that's nice. Let's see if we can find one that I did where I made it. So like recently we've done, you know, fossil fuel, sedimentary rock, and I adjusted them. So these are shorter. You can click on this one and preview it. So I like it too, because there's like, you can do teacher pace where like I control it and they all have it on their screen and we work through it together, or you can student pace it. And so it depends on what we're doing, but they have, for science, they have like, you know, virtual field trips where like we're talking about sedimentary rocks here. They can see like real world examples, you know, because a lot of times with science, like that's the hardest problem, is they don't have real world experiences anymore. They're stuck in front of a computer screen. So when we're talking about stuff, they make no personal connections whatsoever with it. So getting them to see it and make personal connections is big. And then
so
the
these are
collaboration
lessons
board.
already created.
Yeah.
That you can take and tweak.
Yeah. So I shortened this because this was like a extension activity. And so a lot of them, if you use the full lesson, it takes 45 minutes for them to complete, to an hour even. This one I shortened it down and I cut most of them out. I made it like 7 or 8 slides, I think. So this is like the whole process. So they got to read and review. Again, it was just review. So that's why I shortened it. And then there's a little video over it, and then a 5-question quiz at the end. Sometimes I'll use them for grades. Sometimes I'll just look at them, that kind of thing. But say we were doing, metaphors. Let's see if there's something. We search it. And you can, there's metaphors and similes for 4th grade. You can do it by subject. You can do it by 5th grade. So if you want to see a 5th grade one. You can do a school, library, district. I always just do all of them. But like, here's a 3rd through 5th grade one explaining metaphors. And it's like already ready for you. You just assign it to your kids. And I assign it through Google Classroom. And it's like a poll. I don't know. Or they tell you how much it's like a pre-assessment. Here's a metaphor that you've heard in the past, and they collaborate and it pops up. If we do it like whole group, it'll like pop up on the board and they can all read each other's. So they're seeing it and they could comment, they could put pictures, there's examples. Here's a messy office. So again, a virtual exploration for them, for metaphors even. Another one. It's really great, but like a lot of times too, I'll put these into my station rotations where it's, you know, I'm doing a small group at a station like over here. 4 of the kids will get on the Nearpod and it'll be a 20-minute station. They'll work on it and it's self-directed. So I'll assign it as student directed. And then the next one, they'll do sorts and groups. So if it was metaphors, you know, might work with them here on writing them. Here they're doing the Nearpod, back there they're sorting metaphor versus simile. And then over there, maybe they're practicing using them or something, or doing test questions over it, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, these are all pre-made.
For ECRs.
Yeah.
Do an ECR.
Yeah, really though. So there's all, like, I mean, it covers everything. Oh, and there's little games. So you can do a quiz as in like time to climb is what it's called. And they like race each other up and they get more points. And so
How
that's
do
that
you,
engagement.
how are you, or how do you assure that your students are on task and
Mhm.
not looking on YouTube or?
I mean, that's always a risk, but again, I place typically like based on the assignment, the higher level engaging activities I place further out. So like the sort, the partner sort, they typically do the sort. They like to do the sort because it's hands-on with the partner. So I'll place them further out. If it's a computer, I typically place them here so I can see them from my table. And if it's a kid I'm concerned about it, they face that way so I can see their screen. Again, there's always a risk that they're on something they shouldn't be. But typically someone rats them out too because they're kids and they'll tell on each other. So someone will tell on you is what I tell them. And you lie to me once and it loses my trust. And it takes a lot to earn it back, you know, but also on here, you can see, it's like, let's see, student pace. You can view their progress as well. So I'll have my laptop and I tell them I'm looking at what you're writing and I can see it as you go. So you can see their collaboration and stuff on here is what they said. Hold on, if I can get there. It's like what they saw. And then you can do it where they automatically post or you can approve what they're writing. So like fossil fuels are used for many things such as filling up cars. When we use them for gas, fossil fuels are used for gas, coal and fire, much more in our environment. They're non-renewable, so there's only so much of it, blah, blah. So I tell them I'm looking at your answers, you
So
know?
could you go back to that one for a second?
Yeah.
So whenever they post there on the board, so on your screen, you can see what they're responding. If you
Yeah,
haven't set where you
this
have
is
to
mine.
approve it.
Yes.
Okay, so from there, if you hit the green arrow, I mean, the green check mark, does that make it like pop up on everybody's screen and like
Yeah, everybody can
publishes
see
it to the
it.
board?
Yeah. So you can set it where you don't have to approve it too.
I like that.
But I have had too many times where they put something that they should not. And so at that point, I'm like, no, you know, and they get a consequence for typing something that they think's funny. Or irrelevant, or maybe I just want them to add more like. So we can make factories. I'd probably delete that and make them redo it and say, hey, like, that's not enough. You know, I see where you're going with that, but like, I need you to use academic vocabulary or something like that. And then their quizzes, I can see their grades. It gives you a score, like they got 5 out of 5, you know. A lot of the games, like this is a match one. I tell them they have to redo it until they get 100. So if I see anything besides 5 out of 5, they go redo it. You can see their responses. There's a short constructor response right here. Explain in your words what fossil fuels and how they are formed. So they have to type it up.
So when they do those short constructed response, do you require them to do complete sentences, capital letters?
It depends
all
on our
that?
timing. This one was like, hurry up, we have 10 minutes, like a finisher, you
Mhm.
know, like a filler to fill the rest of class time. So this one, no. If it's a full lesson and I'm planning it as like a day or a station, it depends on the question and how they respond.
But I think the general expectations that you have set, you know, as
Yes.
far as not just having like
Yeah.
a phrase just jotted there, you're
Yeah.
getting a complete sentence.
Yeah, and I'll
That's
push
just
it
great.
back and I'll tell them, even if I'm over there, I'll like occasionally I'll stop and I'll look and be like, I'll say their name, because if you say their name, they typically will go back, because they're like, oh, she's looking, you know. You can even see who's on the leaderboard and who's on there for scores and what they've scored, for the need to climb, that kind of thing. You can do grades off of it, or you could just use it as a formative assessment.
If you take a grade off of there and you have a student absent, what do you do? How do you? What do you do for that?
Well, this can be pushed out, or I push out through Google Classroom. So I'll either print it if it's something for a grade
Okay,
and have them do it on paper, or I'll have them do it at study hall, on the computer through Google Classroom, or some of them will do it at home. It depends on the kid.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to serve on any committees?
Yeah.
Or sometimes we have
Different clubs and
the
organizations.
clubs, organizations.
Yeah, at my last school, I get through a yearly talent show, so that was like a big output that I would do each year for
Okay.
them. It takes a lot. It's right after STAR and it's like 4 or 5 days after school commitment. And we do auditions after school. And they have to apply and send in their application. They get an audition time. There's a whole committee that sits and they have to perform for the committee and they have to get approved and make it. Only about like 10 people make it, or 12 people. Then
Is
there's
that per grade?
no, total whole school.
Oh.
It's PK through 5. Anybody can audition. They have to have it has to be school appropriate. It could be a group, like it's a whole shebang. And then there's like, we run after school rehearsal, dress rehearsal. We do a daytime dress rehearsal for the whole school to attend. We do concessions, photo booths, like decorations for the whole stage, like it's a whole shebang. And then there's nighttime show where all the parents and grandparents come, and it's really cool. And the kids all like they do everything. So like I don't do any announcing, no one does any announcing, like the kids host it, they stand up, they announce it, they like do all the things. So that's like one of my big things I do for, I love the talent show. It was a big part, like when I was a kid, I always participated in it. So when I came to a school that didn't do a talent show like that, I was like, what?
What?
Like, we don't do a talent show? And so I proposed the idea of
Of course,
throwing
they
it, and they were like,
Part
well,
of
if you
it.
want to take it, that was their response, that, I mean, if you want to do it, go for it. I'm like, well, okay, I'll do it. So now it's a yearly
That's
tradition, yes.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I loved it. Because I mean, I learned even more seeing it from a teacher's perspective, because I saw it from a trainer that was showing it, but she wasn't a classroom teacher anymore. So, she had it set to where I was the audience or the
Yeah.
student. But it's just different coming from an adult utilizing it and then thinking about how kids apply it in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's really cool. So I'm going to share like a couple of things about, grade level specific type information, just so that you're aware and kind of give you some more details about, our school and how, our schedules are run and whatnot. So with in grades, basically from first grade on, classrooms are departmentalized or semi-departmentalized. And then on some grade levels have multiple content areas, I mean, teachers of the same content area, and then some of them, you know, some are just solo. They're, for example, in the 5th grade math department, it's just one math teacher that teaches all the grade level. Whereas the RLA components have a two-way switch, and so they have a planning partner. I know that, you know, planning is a big piece of a teacher's job, of course. And so do you have experience with having a planning partner or planning solo, both? What are your experiences with that?
Well, in 1st grade, we were all self-contained, and so we would have to plan all subjects, which is a lot, you know, like to have to plan 6 subjects for every single day is too much for one person to do on your own. So how we split that was that each person planned a different subject, so. One of the teachers did math planning and they planned for the whole grade level math. One would do ELAR, or one did writing and phonics, one would do reading, and then one would do science and social studies, because we'd alternate days for first grade. We'd all plan separately in a shared drive. So we never met as a team to plan. We just would plan it, they'd be on there, then you as a individual teacher would take what's on there and I would adapt it, like she'd plan math, so it'd say what to do. But I'd then take it and adjust it for me, you know, like, hey, we're supposed to cover this, coins, you do unit 5, lesson, blah, blah, blah. We're doing this to intro, blah, you know, and you take it and adjust it to yourself. And they would do the same for all the other subjects, because it was so many. This past year doing science, I was not self-contained, but departmentalized, where I had just me, myself, and I to figure out lesson plans every day, which was a challenge in itself, but it's also nice because you do it on your own time and your own flexibility, and like you do what you want to do, you know, like as good or as bad as it is. It's hard because you don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of, but at the same time, it makes it easier for you to get it done on your time, you know? So in that aspect, there's challenges and there's positives to all ways of doing it. It's just what you're willing to do.
Speaking in terms of departmentalized classrooms, just there's a lot of what I have observed from, you know, seeing the classes and how they're run. How important do you think that it is to have streamlined expectations and procedures in place that are the same across the grade level?
It's funny because I talk with my mom about this a lot, because she, you know, coming in, she has 4 math teachers per grade level. And I kind of feel like my outlook on it is that all of us are different and all of us have different personalities. And so all of our delivery is going to be very different than each other. Not because like any one way is better than another, but like I might be more loose and like loud and like we're gonna do it one way, and somebody else might want them all sitting and like, you know, present it in a different way. And I think as long as it's the same material being covered, maybe at the same pace and the same timeline, the delivery is gonna vary depending on the teacher, and the execution and the success is gonna vary, because if I did it the way you did it, it might not go as well for me, because that's just not how my brain works, you know, and so my execution might not be as good. But if you came into mine and tried to do it the way I did it, it's probably not going to go as well either. So I think as long as you're covering the same content at the same pace and on the right timeline, I think the delivery is up to you, in my opinion. But I know that's a very controversial topic. So
you covered, you know, when it comes to content wise. Now, what about like behavioral expectations, for example? You know, with I've seen classrooms that have a different set of rules from one class to the other, and I've seen the other way where everything is streamlined, where they all share the same class rules, the same consequences for rule infractions and whatnot. So what is your take on that part?
I think procedurally, it's important to have unity across classrooms. One, for the kids' sake, because they are kids, and like keeping up with 12 different ways of doing things is a lot for anyone or any one kid, even an adult, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for them to have, like, you know, you don't want to get told no by mom and yes by dad, you know, like that creates frustration for us, but it also creates frustration for them. And so I think procedurally, like expectations, you'd want it to be the same across. Again, delivery is going to be different for every person because of tolerance and, you know, personalities, which is inevitable. Like you're not going to be able to make it perfectly uniform. But I think delivery and expectations, like what is okay and what's not, is important to unify across.
Do you have any questions for us? Now that we've questioned you then.
Oh, no. What are your expectations for before and after school involvement with teachers?
As long as the teacher can abide by contract hours, then if they choose to do something before school, there's tutorials or whatnot, that's up to them on what they want to do. And then after school, there's times that are a little after contract hours that were required occasionally to meet if there's something important we need to discuss during a faculty meeting or whatnot. But I try to communicate that ahead of time, so you have time to plan, make arrangements for childcare, for example, or just in general to have appointments adjusted for that day. But generally, our hours, are from 7:30 to 3:30, and you stay as late as you want, come as early as you want, I'm not gonna stop you, but, as long as you're getting your job done, then there's not a set time on, how early or how late you have to stay. Beyond your contract hours, for sure.
That was great.
Yeah, well, we've learned a lot about you, and everything was wonderful. You shared a lot of great things. Right now, we've got a couple more interviews that we're gonna have, next week or so, but we'll be in touch with you. Either way, whether, we decide to move forward or have, different plans after all, just to let you know, what we have decided. And then I'll give you feedback after that, as far as how the interview went, and we'll go from there.
I'm excited, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's nice to
Have a
meet
great
you.
day.